Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the video. This is episode number 5 of the Baja front suspension build. And what we're going to be working on today is finish fabricating and install the shock tower mount. Now, I've been working on stuff since the last video. I know it's been a couple of weeks since the last video, so before we start working on that shock mount, let me show you what I've been working on. I did put out a little supplemental video showing me fabricating the other control arm, and with that other control arm I also showed you a CNC plasma cutter that I got going, and with that I made the lower shock mounts for the control arms. So I've got those tacked up on both sides here. And I also, in episode number 4, talked about how this arm was going to be in the way of the upper control arm, and I took some measurements and found out that that was definitely going to be in the way more than was acceptable. So I remade both of these arms, and you can see I gave them a kick so that they stay up high and then cut down just in time to miss the one-piece front end. I also needed to get the steering shaft going in place, so I put my steering wheel in here. I got a steering shaft and U-joints. And I also got a Seiko rack. This is the rack that I'm actually going to run in here. I didn't want to keep working with that other rack anymore because I knew that that wasn't going to be the rack that I was going to use. So I got the Seiko rack. I made the same modifications to the top that I was doing with the other rack. And having the steering shaft in here will allow me to design the upper control arm so that it clears that the steering shaft. This is a temporary rack that I set up so that I could find my permanent location of the shock absorber. And this location right here is set up so that I get maximum compression or up travel and maximum droop or extension. Now, once I had this set up, I put the one-piece front end on, and I realized that I actually had some clearance issues on the top here. I was thinking that I was going to be able to set this up like the other Baja, and if I take you over here, I've got the one-piece front end taking off of this one, and you can see that on the front end of this Baja, with the one-piece front end on here, there's enough room that I could have a bar going across the top and then have tabs coming down for the shock absorbers. And I thought that's how I was going to do the setup on this new one. What I guess didn't fully take into account is these shock absorbers are quite a bit smaller than the other ones. These are 10-inch travel. The other ones I'm using are 12-inch travel. In addition to that, these are 2-inch. The other ones are 2.5, and these are emulsion, and the other ones are remote reservoir. So all of that makes the other shock absorbers bigger. On the new front end, I'm setting it up so that at full compression, the chassis sits completely on the ground, which will give me more travel, but it also raises the location where my shock absorbers get installed. So all of that adding up made it so that my shock absorber mounting locations were up really close to the top of the one-piece front end. And to show you a little bit more what I'm talking about, let me grab the one-piece front end, which is right here, and I'll throw it up on the chassis here, and then we'll go up underneath and I'll show you what I'm dealing with. Okay, for starters, you can see how I remade this bar here, and it comes up pretty tight, about as high and tight as I could get it, and then it runs back. But if you look through here, where the upper control arm goes, that used to be straight through here. It's opened up a lot of space, so at full compression, this will allow me a lot more clearance for that upper control arm to come through here. So that should be good. But if you look up here, I hope you guys can see that, there's probably an 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches of clearance from the top of the shock absorber here to the one-piece front end. And there would have been no way I could have actually run an 1.5 inch bar over the top of that and have a tab down on there. that would have been too tight. So instead of going with an over-the-top bar, I'm going to build a shock tower that comes up through the middle here. This is a temporary one, but I'm building a permanent one. This is the shock tower that I'm talking about. This will be the shock tower. This will sit over the 1.5-inch tube that's down there at the bottom. And then this is going to get welded onto here, and this will connect with the tube on the firewall. I hope you guys like some of these parts. They should be a little bit fancier, a little bit nicer now that I've got the CNC plasma cutter. I made all of these pieces with the CNC plasma cutter. I'm making good friends with that, and I'll have some videos showing more of that as I get a little bit more acclimated with it. Okay, so this is the temporary bracket that was just so I could measure the height. And I need to rip all this stuff out of here so that I can take the new shock tower and set it up in place, and then tack my little bracket on there, and then at that point we can bolt both of the shock absorbers in there and actually test to travel to make sure that I didn't mess anything up when I made this shock tower. So now I can take my new shock tower and set it up in place here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the camera up because I need to be very precise with this. So I'm going to set the camera up and clamp this thing in place, and then put some tacks in various spots, and then double check everything, and then I'll tack it up a little bit more solid. Alright, let's take a look at what we've got here before I tack this up. This is the top plate. The shock tower here, it is level as far as the eyeball can tell, and my distance is correct from here to here, and just in eyeballing it, it looks to be lining up with the shock mount down below. And also eyeballing it, it looks to be center with the chassis. Now I'm going to drag out the old TIG welder here and set these tacks up, and we'll check it out before I do any substantial welding. Alright, check that out, guys. We're making some serious progress at this point. Now, it's a little bit melodramatic watching me just tack that in place because it seemed to go together, you know, so easy. But actually, I spent Saturday and Sunday almost all day measuring up, making templates, putting it in the computer, plasma cutter, cutting it out, drilling the holes. A couple of these I did more than once because I would do it once and I wasn't happy with it. So you're actually looking at many hours of work here. It's just at this point it's more like a puzzle piece, and the pieces just kind of fell together and I tacked it in, which is really awesome. It's kind of some of the fun parts about fabrication is all the work and effort that you put into these pieces, and then to be able to actually assemble them is very rewarding. But either way, I've got some very small tacks on these to hold them in place. It's real solid right now. It's not Baja solid, but it's solid enough for fabrication at this point. I want to put some more solid welds on here, but before I do that, I want to double check that everything here is correct at this point. So what I'm going to do is, for the first time ever, this is pretty exciting, bolt on both shock absorbers, and then I want to run them through their travel and just make sure that nothing binds and everything is where it's supposed to be. And then once I do that, and then I'm happy with that, I'll put some more substantial welds on here to hold it in place. That is looking pretty good. That's pretty exciting for the first time to have both shock absorbers bolted in place. So right now I've got both control arms set up at ride height. So let's see how it does at full droop. It's going down. You can't see because there's a dog in your way. You're in my shot. Okay, so full droop here. Come on over here. Come here. Get your butt over. Come on over here. Or back up over here. There you go. So at full droop, it is just starting to bind at the steering shaft here, which is good because I can't go any lower than that. If the shock absorber lets me get that low, that's fine because I'm going to limit that with the limit straps. So that's good. Let's see what it looks like at full compression. All right, that's as high as it can go with the shock absorber there. So with the rack and pinion centered and this pretty much at zero camber, it is actually. It's right, this is just starting to bite in there, which is awesome. Let's check our height. If I measure to the center, and I am estimating this a little bit, let's say it's 33.25, and my chassis is 16.5. It gives me 16.75. That means the center of the spindle here will be 16.75 of an inch above the chassis if the chassis was sitting on the ground. And if we multiply that by 2, that is roughly a 33.5 inch tire. Let's call that a 33 inch tire. And if you remember, I'm designing this for 33 to 35 inch tires. So that works out really well because I'm also going to limit that with bump stops. So that's great. I'm extremely happy with that on the top end and the bottom end. I did make these extra wide just to give me some play, or if I need to make any changes at all, that'll allow me to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to machine some nice aluminum spacers that will go in there so that I can pinch this down nice and tight and it'll center the shock absorber. But I've got, I try to make it tight in there, but at the same time give it, at least 1/8 of an inch all over the place. But I don't want to have the tabs too large because that'll just, make them weaker. So that's good. I'm very happy with that. This will give me about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches of clearance from the top of here to the one-piece front end. So that'll be good. This is all I'm going to do on this for now because I don't want to get it all too permanent before I do the upper control arms and the bumps and all that. This will all get welded solid. I'm going to make probably a piece of 1/8 inch that goes in here. It'll have some triangles cut out. It's not just going to be a solid piece, but it'll fill in this gap so that the weight of the chassis and everything isn't just going through this piece. It'll be shared throughout all this, and I'll probably bring that down here and have a piece that comes back to continue tying all that into here, so that if this chassis is coming down to a hard hit and this shock tower is taking the weight of all that, it'll disperse all of that to not just a couple points on the chassis here, it'll kind of spread it throughout. And then it'll also have something in the front here, I'm not sure yet, probably something that comes off of here and then splits and ties into these, because it needs more than just this giving the shock tower strength this way. Because if I'm going along right now and one side hits a rock or something and pushes this way, it needs to have something that'll really tie this shock tower into the chassis side laterally, not just straight up and down. But I'm not going to do that yet, because there's a small chance that some of this might be in the way of the upper control arm or something. That's why at this point everything is just kind of tacked in place, so that if I need to make some changes moving forward, I can. But either way, guys, that is super exciting. It's so awesome to have the shock absorbers in here after so much work getting to this point, to be able to get to the point where I'm probably more than half, maybe 3/4 of the way done with the front suspension, and getting pieces in here so I can actually see it go through its motions is really cool. That's going to be it for this video. In the next video, we're going to do the upper control arms. Those will be interesting because they have a lot of clearances that they need to go around, but that'll be the next video, and then the last video will be the bump stops and the limit straps. So I hope you guys are enjoying the videos. Thank you for watching them. I hope they're helping you out with your projects, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care.